The biggest mistakes we've made by far, I've made, not we've made, biggest mistakes I've made by far are mistakes of omission and not commission. I probably cost Berkshire at least $5 billion, for example, by sucking my thumb 20 years ago or close to it when Fannie Mae was having some troubles, and we could have bought the whole company for practically nothing. And
yeah, most smart people, unfortunately, in Wall Street figure that they can make a lot more money, a lot easier, just by one way or another getting an override on other people's money or delivering services in some way that people, and the monetization of hope and greed, is a way to make a huge amount of money.
Mr. Buffett, if you were about to start all over again, what profession would you choose and why?
I would choose what I do because A, I have fun at it. I'm reasonably good at it. I meet a lot of interesting people through it. No heavy lifting. It fits me. But that's not advice for you. I mean, you have to find out what's your passion in life. It's a terrible mistake to kind of sleepwalk through your life, because unless Shirley MacLaine's right, it's the only one you're going to have. And I was very lucky in that I found my passion early. I mean, that's not easy. That takes some luck. It just so happened my dad was in a business that had a very small office, and he had a bunch of books down there. And when I would go down there on Saturday or after school, I would start reading those books, and it turned me on. And but when you're in a position to make choices, I always tell the kids that come visit me, I tell them, go to work for an organization you admire or an individual you admire. That means that many of them become self-employed, but the idea, you can't get a bad result. I went to work for Ben Graham when I was 24. I only worked for him for less than 2 years, but I jumped out of bed every day in the morning. I was excited about what I was going to do. I was learning things. I was with a man I admired. I never asked my salary when I took that job. I moved to New York City and found out what my salary was when I got the check. Well, if you're interested in business, I definitely think you ought to learn all the accounting you can by the time you're in your early 20s. Accounting is the language of business. Now, that doesn't mean it's a perfect language, so you have to know the limitations of that language, as well as all aspects of it. So I would advise you to learn accounting, and I would advise you to be, in terms of part-time employment or anything else, work at a number of businesses. There's nothing like seeing how to build your judgment in the future about businesses. When you understand what kind of things are very competitive and what kind of things are less competitive and why that works that way, all of that adds to your knowledge. So I would do a lot of reading. If you're interested in investments, I would take the accounting courses. I do a lot of reading about investments, and I would get as much business experience. I would talk business with people that are in business to find out what they think makes their operation tick, or where they have problems and why. I just think you just kind of sop it up every place that you can.
the biggest mistakes we've made, biggest mistakes I've made by far, are mistakes of omission and not commission. I mean, it's the things I knew enough to do. They were within my circle of competence, and I was sucking my thumb. And that is really, those are the ones that hurt. They don't show up anyplace. I probably cost Berkshire at least $5 billion, for example, by sucking my thumb 20 years ago or close to it when Fannie Mae was having some troubles, and we could have bought the whole company for practically nothing. And I don't worry about that if it's Microsoft, because I don't know it. Because Microsoft isn't in my circle of competence. And so I don't have any reason to think I'm entitled to make money out of Microsoft or out of cocoa beans or whatever. But I did know enough to understand Fannie Mae, and I blew it. And that never shows up under conventional accounting. But I know the cost of it. I know, I passed it up. And those are the big, big mistakes. And I've had plenty of them. And unless I tell you about them in the annual report, and I resist the temptation sometimes, unless I tell you about them in the annual report, you're not going to know it because it doesn't show up under conventional accounting. But omission is way bigger than commission. big opportunities in life have to be seized. We don't do very many things, but when we get the chance to do something that's right and big, we've got to do it. And even to do it in a small scale is just as big a mistake almost as not doing it at all. I mean, you really gotta grab them when they come, and because you're not going to get 500 great opportunities.
Yeah, most smart people, unfortunately, in Wall Street figure that they can make a lot more money, a lot easier, just by one way or another, getting an override on other people's money or delivering services in some way that people, and the monetization of hope and greed, is a way to make a huge amount of money. And right now it's just take hedge funds. I mean, I've had calls from a couple of friends in the last month that don't know anything about investing money. They've been unsuccessful and everything else. And, one of them called me the other day and said, well, I'm forming a small hedge fund, 125 million he was talking about. Like the thought that since it was only 125 million, maybe we ought to put in 10 million or something. I mean, if you looked at this fellow's Schedule D on his 1040 for the last 20 years, you'd think he ought to be mowing lawns. But he may get his 125 million. I mean, and it's just astounding to me how willing people are during a bull market just to toss money around because they think it's easy. And of course that's what they felt about internet stocks a few years ago. They'll think about something else next year too. But the biggest money made in Wall Street in recent years has not been made by great performance, but it's been made by great promotion.
Well, if I were in Wall Street, I'd probably be a lot for it. You get overstimulated in Wall Street, and you hear lots of things, and you may shorten your focus, and a short focus is not conducive to long profits. And here I can just focus on what businesses are worth, and I don't need to be in Washington to figure out what the Washington Post newspaper is worth, and I don't need to be in New York to figure out what some other company is worth. It's an intellectual process. And the less static there is in that intellectual process, really the better off you are.
What is the intellectual process?
The intellectual process is defining your area of competence in valuing businesses, and then within that area of competence, finding whatever sells at the cheapest price in relation to value. And there are all kinds of things I'm not competent to value, but there are a few that I am competent to value.
I have an old-fashioned belief that I only should expect to make money in things that I understand. And when I say understand, I don't mean understand, what the product does or anything like that. I mean understand what the economics of the business are likely to look like 10 years from now or 20 years from now. I know in general what the economics of, say, Wrigley chewing gum will look like 10 years from now. The internet isn't going to change the way people chew gum. It isn't going to change which gum they chew. If you own the chewing gum market in a big way, and you've got Double Mint and Spearmint and Juicy Fruit, those brands will be there 10 years from now. So I can't pinpoint exactly what the numbers are going to look like on Wrigley, but I'm not going to be way off if I try to look forward on something like that. That evaluating that company is within what I call my circle of competence. I understand what they do. I understand the economics of it. I understand the competitive aspects of the business.